And there was this two-seater small sports car, and there was the guy honking and swearing. But next to him was this huge angel. Every angel I've ever seen has been ginormous, huge. Not necessarily wings, but something going on back there in a way I can't describe. Robes, I guess. I don't know. They're not naked. But anyway, I see this angel. This angel's like all bent down as if he was going to be compressed by this sports car. And this angel, swear to God, slowly turned his head, looked at me. I'm here to, among other things, share my near-death experience, and that has everything to do with God. So I will just jump right in, if that's okay with you, Melissa.
Absolutely. Go for it and say whatever you feel led to say.
Okay. I had what we now call a near-death experience in Shawnee Mission, Kansas. I'm from Kansas, born and raised Lutheran, very conservative religious family, by the way, a very conservative part of the country. But a loving family, no drama or anything to speak of. I was 3 days after my 22nd birthday. I was just graduating from Kansas State University. I hated change so much that I intended to marry a little boy I met in the 7th grade whose name was Bob Clark. My maiden name was Clark, and I thought, this is great. I can keep on being Kim Clark. That was my plan. And he was also a Lutheran and a neighbor. So all of our families, everything was set. And I was happy about that. God had different plans. As it turns out, I had an expired driver's license and I decided to buy a car. Again, one that Bob Clark had determined was practical for me, which was a Volkswagen Squareback. I mean, I had no mind of my own. It was like, okay, it was either my dad, my grandpa, or Bob Clark that was actually telling me what to do. And that's what the women in my family did. They served the men, and I was raised that way. And boy, did I turn out different. But that's my husband's story, not mine. So my dad took me on May 25th, 1970, to the Shawnee Mission Department of Motor Vehicles, where I did apply for a license, and I had to renew my driver's license because in college, I never needed to drive. I just let it expire. And where I had, by the way, and this becomes relevant, I didn't pass my driver's test that time because I could not parallel park. I couldn't get my body within 3 feet or my car within 3 feet of the curb. And my body was in the car, so that all counts. Anyway, I'm going to tell you my dad's memory because I have no memory beyond waiting for literally my number to come up. And that's where I began to figure out, but only in retrospect, how funny God is. I mean, God is truly a stitch if you just tune into that channel. So I was waiting for my number to come up. And I remember telling my dad I felt funny, but that's curtains for the whole day. But he did tell me that there weren't any chairs, but apparently I signed everything appropriately. And we were leaving the building, and he noticed my complexion was white on white, and then I collapsed into and through his arms onto the sidewalk outside of the building, blocking both the entrance and the exit. So it did attract attention. There happened to be a uniformed nurse passing by. She, of course, ran over. She decided I wasn't breathing and she couldn't discern a pulse. So this is just before 911 in the country. So the volunteer fire department from Shawnee Mission arrived, and then an ambulance was called from a hospital in Kansas City, Missouri. This was in eastern Kansas, but that was the closest place for a proper hospitalization for a young person not breathing on a sidewalk. So the volunteer fire department came first. And honestly, bless their hearts, my dad, from what I'm about to tell you, he never held this against them. They're probably farmers, these were volunteers. But they decided I wasn't breathing. And they had new portable ventilator packages, which according to my dad, they were new because they were undone. And then they didn't know which end to put on. And it was a mess. So they finally figured out how to operate this thing. They just What are the odds someone would need this on a Saturday morning? I mean, it just, so they applied this seal to my face and turned it on. Well, this portable ventilator had two features. One to, of course, ventilate, but the other to vacuum, because sometimes people suffocate because there's things in our throat. That's why we say to our children, don't run with candy. You know, so there was a vacuum mode that could extract objects out of the throat, and then a flick of a switch pump the air in. Well, they hit me with vacuum mode, and again, a funny God joke, it sucked the life out of me, but it did. So they turned to my father and said, you know, sorry, there's nothing more we can do. But then a man that for all of my dad's days, he called the Good Samaritan. Right now, there's quite a crowd around my body. And he came through the crowd, just pushed everyone aside, including the firemen, and swearing like a mule skinner. So we figured he was from Missouri. That's our joke about the state line. No one in Kansas swears. So he did what we now call CPR. He did chest thumps and he did mouth to mouth. And then he turned to my father and said, I'm not getting a blankety blank blank. Swear word thing. My dad's memory ends there until at some point later, there's a great cheer in the crowd. The ambulance had arrived. Just on my own, I was breathing. I was still unconscious. My body was put in the back of the ambulance. He jumped in. Off we went to St. Luke's Hospital. These places have names. Things went kind of sour in the emergency room, but I don't want to give away the ending of a good book. I did write a book called After the Light, but she lived, but I lived. Here's what I remember, and the reason I'm with Melissa today. When we die, things happen that I would call being more alive than dead. My near-death experience, and now the near-death experiences of countless people I've interviewed over the decades, because I've become an expert in this area. People often refer to it's like being more alive. That's our real home. This is, many near-death experiencers talk about this life being school, and we're here to learn lessons. And in case you hadn't noticed, people, it's a hard life. Earth is a tough school. It's full of stress, to say the least. But we as souls, we're either given it or chosen. I'm not sure how that works, but we're here. But there's something even better waiting for us, no matter what. I promise. I mean, I truly promise. Anyway, I could hear a woman's voice to my left saying, I'm not getting a pulse, I'm not getting a pulse. And I turned to her with the same sense of reality with which I'm now speaking and said, of course you're getting a pulse. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking. And I really felt like I was using my voice and my eyes and my jaw. But she ignored me. And this went on for a while. I got to say, I got annoyed, because who likes to be ignored? Especially when people are thinking you're dead. So I don't know. Maybe I just got into like a near-death snit. I don't know, but I thought, okay, I'm out of here. And with that, I found myself in a completely different environment. It was gray, foggy, warm. I had a sense of like warm. And I emotionally felt like I was waiting for something with the same confidence I would have with my boarding pass at the gate as we're boarding a plane. I mean, it was just, I had no anxiety, no, gee, where am I? It was like, oh, this, yeah, okay. I knew I wasn't alone. My sense is that I was with other people, but I couldn't see them because of this fog. Parenthetically, this fog interests me to this day because, get this, in World War II, certainly a time of massive global danger, there were more movies made about the afterlife than any other time of cinema history. They were made in America, Great Britain, France, India, Egypt, Australia, Japan, I mean, everywhere. Start looking for these old movies. 100% of the ones I've come across, and I collect them, have to do with fog. Like we go through a transition place where there's fog. Here Comes Mr. Jordan was just on TV. Great angel movie, by the way. Mr. Jordan is an angel. And our hero is in fog. And I thought, yeah, here we go again. So there's some maybe, I don't know, collective consciousness about this, or memory, or pre-knowledge that, when you go, this is going to be your way station. Or so, I don't know what to call it. By the way, I don't really have words for my entire near-death experience. It's taken me decades, and I still stumble because it's an ineffable experience. Ineffable meaning there are no words. There just aren't words. So when I speak, I search for words, and also I go, and then. But the other thing is that it's timeless. There is no and then. I don't know how to describe it. It's the spiritual life. It's different than the earth rotating. It's just different. Having said that, and then what I was waiting for showed up in the form of a light that was brighter. Don't stare at the sun, but if you had 1 million suns and you could safely stare at them, I'd say brighter than that. I have no other measure of brightness other than the star that we circle around. Didn't hurt my eyes. It came up under me with such power. I mean, just immeasurable power. And I really do have a hard time with words. And how do I describe that I was with God? This was God. This was our creator in the reals. I mean, like Moses at the burning bush, except I was in the middle of the burning bush. And it was all love beyond my capacity to share with you how we are so very loved unconditionally. It's just beautiful how much God loves us. And even God is such a weak 3 letters. I'm more comfortable saying my creator. I don't know, but I did have words. I don't know if I said them aloud, but I said, in my perspective, homie home. I later learned in sharing all this with my parents that when I was little and learning language, and we'd been away from the neighborhood and we were pulling up to the house, I'd go, homie home, homie home. I was probably about 2, It was a Gucci goo moment for my folks, but I don't remember that. But by golly, in the presence of my creator, I said homie home, and I was homie home. This light, or the light of God, or whatever you want to call it, spread out under me in all directions. And as if I had eyes, like Superman eyes, because again, the brightness was incredible, but also didn't hurt. I could see it spreading out all directions in a linear fashion, like forever. And at the same time, it was layering on top of itself. And I was just given to know, as they say, that I was beholding eternity. And it wasn't just time, as we describe it, but it was also dimensions. And they were literally endless. And it was staggering, and yet not bad. I mean, I was in ecstasy. If people say, is there a heaven? I'd say, well, yeah. And it's being in God's love, which we can find on earth, by the way. This doesn't have to happen when we die. We can summon that up right now. It's called be nice to others. There's God. Like, hello. So I ask questions. Any fool would ask in the presence of the Lord. Basically, what the heck is going on? And, why are we born? And what about pain and suffering? And there was a niggling part of my brain going, gee, that was a profound question, Kim. And the answers I got back, I wasn't being informed, I was remembering. And if I'd had a head, I would have smacked it and gone, oh yeah. So why are we born? Well, we pretty much begged for it. And what about pain and suffering? Well, that's the fast track back to our source, which is God again. On it went. I thought I was, I had no ego really, but nonetheless, upon reflection, gee, I asked good questions. But then I got information I didn't ask about and fought, and I was being sent back, and it was like, okay, God's fallible after all. Big mistake. No, 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 no. Not happening. You blew it now, God. So I said, no, anyone would. Seriously, anyone would. And God basically said yes. And we had this ping pong game. Well, on earth, we do have free will. I have evidence of that. Not on earth. It's not our will at all. It's God's will. That's his field. And so I was sent back. Well, remember when I said that I had failed my driver's test because I couldn't look parallel park? I found myself on my back about the same distance from my physical body as I was in my car when I flunked that part of the test. And here I'd had the most sacred experience of all. And my first thing was a joke. It was like, dang, I can't even park myself. You know, it was just ridiculous. So I could see, but the me that was me wasn't in that body. And that's another thing to note. This isn't us, not even the polar bear pounds I've put on during the pandemic. Fortunately, this isn't permanent. This is our precious life on earth. But the Kim that is really Kim was not in that body. It was observing that body going, huh? And then I saw a man that I didn't recognize bend over me, and he put his mouth on mine. And with that, I went back into my body, but through him, which is like, wow. And it wasn't organic, but it was emotional. And I could tell you everything about the guy, how, you know, he was feeling a bit of a fool because this wasn't working. And why did I step forward? And what was I thinking? He had all this anxiety and self-doubt, but mainly he had compassion. Well, I had just been with the greatest love of all. So compassion is a really high form of love. And it was like my magnet. I was drawn to that. And when I felt that compassion, I went, well, sure. And then I was back in my body, and that stunk because I was like conscious, but my body wasn't. By the way, I pulled my medical records because when I wrote After the Light, I didn't want some journalists getting them before me. So interesting. I went into the field of medicine, but you can't chart like what I read anymore. It said that my primary diagnosis was unknown, probably cardiac, which, by the way, hasn't happened since, but unknown because of the snafu with the ventilator. I thought, what? I'm a snafu? And my admitting body temperature was 86, which is like great pool temperature, but not good body temperature. So in my consciousness or awareness, whatever, was in my body, but it was dark and dank and icky. And there was a woman's voice calling my name. And I was trying to get to her. And it was my earthly name, but I couldn't. I mean, it was like, I think I haven't read my own book in ages. I should do that. Note to self. But I think I wrote that it was like trying to push back dank, heavy tapestries in a castle, a dark castle hallway or something. I couldn't do it. It was exhausting. I was miserable. So I again did what any fool would do. God, help me, please. Come back, come back. God showed up again. Yay. And I said, take me home. This ain't working. So the communication between God and myself was not in English or even in words. Upon reflection, I would call it a combination of math and music. So skeptics frequently say, oh, near-death experiencers just get what they expect. Well, no, dude, they don't. Because I have no math skills and I have no music skills. I mean, seriously, our choir director in church was my piano teacher. He quit on me, not vice versa, because I couldn't even get through Song of the Volga Boatman. Da, da, da. And in church to this day, I'm just asked to lip sync. I mean, it's bad. And so here is God, though, communicating and vice versa in this combination. Also, by the way, a lot of brain science going on now. And it seems up to about age 10, the brain doesn't know the difference between math and music. So the common wisdom is now expose your young children to music because it'll help their math skills down the line when that window closes. So when God built us, he did a really good job. Very functional, our bodies. Anyway, God opened up a portal or a window or something to my right. And I was told that this was my heaven, but that was also my border. I crossed that border and there'd be no coming back. So it was like, okay, see ya. But what I saw was interesting because it was so beautiful. Oh my gosh. It was like a meadow with countless blades of grass kind of blowing in a breeze. And off in the distance, sort of a white fence thing. And some beyond that, low shrubbery or trees or something. It looked like Kentucky. And to skeptics, I would also say, I've never been to the state of Kentucky. Not before. Back to you get what you expect. I did not expect Kentucky, but I've seen calendar pictures of Kentucky since then. And that's what Kentucky looks like. I thought, well, dang. Except that the colors were not of earth. The grass wasn't green. It was green. And the sky wasn't blue. It was blue. And also, I was aware of every blade of grass. It was, and the grass had awareness. It was life. God made life. And if it grows, and even if it doesn't have a face, it's life. And so I was heading into there. And then God, and again, even using the word God is just so lame, but that's what I got. Said, well, wait, where's that effect? Before you do that, and there's a big, brilliant flash of light. And I was told that if I chose to live, this is where I'd be spending my days. And it was no map. Oh, thank you. But it was where mountains met water. That's all I saw. Well, it wasn't Kansas. So it was like, meant nothing to me. So I'm going to Kentucky or wherever, that form of my heaven. And then another flash that grabbed my attention. And it was like a gallery of people. And I was told that if I chose to live, I would be heavily interacting with those people. And they actually had captions underneath that I could read, very mundane. I come from peasant stock and nothing has changed, nothing highfalutin like you're going to be rich and famous or anything. They were just like next door neighbor, best friend, mentor, colleague, just stuff. And I didn't know any of them. So it's like, I'm going to heaven. And I swear, almost through that window thing, I came this close, when there was another flash and it showed me being of service. Something I'd never had done. I was spoiled. I was firstborn spoiled. You know, grandparents, parents, I mean, I was it. I was used to being served. But I looked at me being of service and I went, cool. Well, who knew God was a hippie? I guess cool meant, yeah, man, I don't know. But I was back, and I was back for good. And to this day, God and I have an argument about, was that a choice or a trick? But I would say I was sent back, though, to serve. And from that point on, everything has fallen into place. Everything I have needed to do to be of service to others has just been right there. And it's been very interesting. So again, I survived. And I had a hamster named Toto. So here comes the joke. I'm in Kansas. I got a hamster named Toto. I put in a bird cage in the front seat of my car, which I named the Green Weenie, my Volkswagen Squareback. And we left for wherever mountains met water. I didn't know, but I had to go. I knew that that was my mission. I had to leave. My family were in shock. I never left anything. I mean, I was the obedient one. I was the raised to be of service, to a guy, but or my dad or to my pastor or whatever. But me going, I'm headed out for parts unknown. I've got $25 and I'm out of here. It was upon reflection, traumatic for my family, and I'm sorry. But at that time, there was I-70, for those listening who are familiar with the roadways of America, but it was a big east-west vein. And approaching I-70, which at that time was a toll road, the weight of this experience was upon me. And I began to yell out to God. I mean, full volume. I hate change. I don't want change. I hate change. And then I began to cry, the blubbery, snotty, ugly, show your eye teeth. You don't want anyone public to see you crying. I was bawling my eyes out. Toto's going, what the heck, lady? And so I kept saying, approaching the toll booth, I hate change. I don't want to change. And then that's when I really found out about God's funny bone. Big sign that said, change needed. Oh, great. Now I can use some Kleenex. Guess what? I hadn't noticed, and I'm sure my mother put it there, but I hadn't noticed until I went, okay, I can use some Kleenex. As I'm working my way to where change was needed, I looked down and there were bucket seats, and behind my emergency brake, there was a white box with big black lettering that said Kimberly Clark. That was my name. Well, it's also a paper manufacturer. They make Kleenex and toilet paper. Now that you know that, every bathroom you go in, you're going to see me. I'm in every bathroom. Kimberly Clark. Anyway, so I grabbed some Kleenex. I was like, oh, funny, Hong Kong. And then made my way across America and had adventures at every stop. But outside of Hays, okay, so I got Toto. I'm leaving Kansas. Outside of Hays, Kansas, took harbor because there was a small tornado. It was small, but it terrified me. So we have the tornado. And ultimately, I wind up where mountains do meet water, Seattle, Washington, known then as now as the Emerald City. So I am Dorothy. God sent me to but I'm like Dorothy if I never left Oz. But I've been living in a wackadoodle place ever since then. And again, everything I've needed to be of service just happened. Graduate school, no problem. Tuition, paid. Job, here. They're offering this to you. I've never applied for a job in my life. I retired as a clinical assistant professor at the University of Washington. I taught death and dying in the School of Medicine for 20 years. Me, this little kid from Kansas. But it was all just given to me on a silver plate. The work within those jobs was hard, and I became the death and dying social worker. Well, guess what? I wasn't afraid of death. So butterflies came out of my mouth when I was calming scared patients or grieving families and friends. I just knew the words without sharing them, because in my brain, Harborview Medical Center still is a trauma center that serves 1/4 of the landmass of the United States. And so this is a big place. And I worked on the intensive care unit and coronary care unit, backup in the emergency room and the burn unit, neuro intensive care unit. People were dying throughout the day and night. And it was my bread and butter. And I was very, very good at what I did. By the way, after I left that, after 10 years, I then founded the Department of Social Work at the world's first bone marrow transplant center. At that time, only children were admitted and half of them died. Again, and they asked me to, they headhunted me. I've just always, again, been in the right place. But at Harborview, on the intensive care unit, I had decided now with my new master's degree in social work that I was crazy, because I had all these after effects, like, I don't know, dead people and angels and what we would call demons or negative energy. And I was aware of a whole, I call them to this day, invisibilities. I'm still aware of them, but that can make you go really blah, 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 blah. So it was my deep, dark secret that I was nuts, but good. In fact, there was one time when I entered through the emergency room at Harborview, and there was someone that looked a lot like me on a gurney and 2-point restraints. And I asked the resident, what's her story? And without even really looking at from his chart, he goes, we're sending her up to lockup, which is psych lockup. because she feels like she's been going in and out of her body. And I thought, whoop-de-daisy, I will be not ever speaking of that. So life, in terms of my memories of a near-death experience, I have a recent metaphor, and it's like a jigsaw puzzle. My puzzle had all the pieces in place, and God came along and, hey, look at this. And then went all airborne and landed, and then I had to go piece by piece. Oh, wait, this seems to fit here. Oh, here's an edge. That works. And put together the pattern of my life from scratch, it felt like. So with this dark secret and this jigsaw puzzle, all these visions, one day a woman named Maria, Hispanic, mainly didn't speak English, had been admitted, first time in Seattle. She was from a rural area, 100 miles east of here. I live in Seattle still. And she's admitted at night and unconscious, big cardiac event. Well, the next day, of course, social worker, I lived on the ICU anyway, but there were things to do like, find money, find a translator, find her family, just kind of the hardcore stuff, which I did not prefer to do. I like the psychological interventions, but, sometimes you just got to get more realistic. And so I did all those things. And then about 3 days after she was admitted, I was on the coronary care unit. Someone flatlined. Well, that happens every hour. But it was Maria. So Harborview is the teaching hospital for the University of Washington. So you don't get a doctor and a nurse and a respiratory therapist when you code, which is flatlining. You get the thundering herds. You get the resident and the interns and the attending and the nursing students and the respiratory therapy students and the social worker. So I watched her being resuscitated. It was pretty easy. And I left when she was stable, and she was still unconscious, but whatever. A few hours later, I got paged back to the unit because Maria was awake and agitated. They couldn't find a translator. So social worker, go in and figure this out. So, okay. So I'm going to condense this story because we just finally did travel stuff. But here's what she told me. She said that during her resuscitation, these are Kim words now, she found herself hovering above her body and correctly told me who was in the room and what was going on, because I thought I was crazy. She must be. I was like the best and the worst person for her to talk to. So I was a big skeptic, and I thought, well, she was well educated. She could hear, because we still believe that hearing is the last sense to go. So yeah. Skipping over the fact that she talked about this wide mouth machine that was spewing out paper. I knew she wasn't educated about that. That only happens at that time, before computers with cardiac arrest. And she said they kept kicking the paper under the bed. Yeah, they did. Saw that myself. I just ignored that. And then she said, like that, no sense of traveling from point A to point B. She found herself outside of the emergency room doors. And she could tell it was one-way driveway. The doors opened automatically. The ambulances were coming in. And I thought, well, yeah, your room is above the emergency room. So someone probably, housekeeping, pushed her bed by the window, which was nuts, really, on my part, because these are people hooked up to big machines. No one in housekeeping pushes anybody to clean. Yeah, hold your breath, ma'am. I'll start that ventilator in a moment. I just got to work on the spot. I mean, that doesn't happen. Also, it rains places. So there's roofs over emergency room entrances. They're not like in the air. So she couldn't have seen anything from her window. But again, I'm ignoring logic. Then she got me. She said that the reason she was agitated was because, again, just like that, she found herself outside of the hospital, somewhere, she thought 3 or 4 stories above the ground, looking at a ledge, an outside ledge, at a tennis shoe. And it was dark blue. There's a white lace going under the heel. The little toe was scuffed up. It was big, grande. And she wanted someone to get the shoe. Not because she didn't know if it was there, but because, oh my gosh, during my resuscitation, that's where I went. And I saw the weirdest thing in the world, a tennis shoe on a ledge. And I still don't know. What's a shoe doing on a hospital ledge anyway? That doesn't even make sense. But now that I'm telling the story, anyone listening is going to start noticing single tennis shoes on the side of a highway or road. It's like, people, don't you notice that one foot is bare? I mean, I don't get it. But anyway, so I went to look for the shoe, and luck o' the Kim, I started on the wrong side of the building. Well, really bad luck. I started outside thinking I could see it, but I couldn't. So then I knew, again, I was a good social worker, so I had to go inside that wrong side of the building. And the windows were almost to the floor, so I didn't have to go in and bother most people unless there was a cart with towels or medical supplies on it blocking. And these were all my patients because they were discharged from the ICU. So I was like, hi, Bob. I got to look down here for a moment. How you doing? Got to go. So I got to the west side of the building. I was on the third floor, and there was a cart in one particular room. I don't recall any patients in there. But anyway, I went to the window and I looked down at a large, dark blue tennis shoe. And I have no words again. And I also know what it's like to be so close to fainting that one cannot support one's body weight, because I felt like I'd been hit by a flour sack in the back of my knees. I was just like going to collapse in shock. And I remember my forehead bonking the glass and out loud saying, this happened to me. And that moment of fog against the glass for a moment and then disappearing. And it was just shocking. I saw this woman's resuscitation. She was flatlining, and she saw something that I was now beholding. So I about had a heart attack myself. I'm not kidding. But I reached down to the shoe. No great ceremony there. And I don't know why. I was being a mean girl, but I went back to her room with the shoe behind my back. Asked her if she knew anything else. What's the inside of the shoe look like? And all she knew was about that scuffed up little toe and the white lace going into the heel. Should I get it confused with any other tennis shoe on any ledge? I mean, come on. But indeed, it was exactly what she described. So then I pulled it from behind my back. And at that point, I suddenly knew Spanish, Viva Zapata. And back then, I know this will come as a shock to listeners, but when one was sick, one actually stayed in the hospital until one was well enough to be discharged home. It's really different now, but she was in the hospital for 3 weeks. This wasn't a hit and miss. I really got to know her. And that shoe sat in that hospital room for any and all to behold. It became the shroud of Turin of Harborview. And when she discharged, she gave me the shoe. And then I followed her for 3 years in cardiology clinic. Again, this wasn't like, oh, I met this woman briefly. I mean, I knew her for years. And then I actually went backpacking, and one of my graduate students took over for me, and I was gone for months and came back. Maria had been a no-show for one of her clinic visits, and I never found her, never saw her again. I don't know what happened to her. So, but I had the shoe, and now skeptics say, oh, well, if you show me the shoe, then I'll believe. To which I say, it's in our garage, in an unmarked box. We have a 900 square foot garage filled with Ola from yours truly. You want to find the shoe, have at it. No one's taking me up on it. If you remember the movie Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark, the very end of the film, some unnamed schlub is pushing this unmarked box, which holds the Ark of the Covenant, into this giant warehouse of unmarked boxes, never to be located again. That's the shoe. But 3.5 weeks ago from the date of this broadcast, I was interviewing someone who was a NASA space engineer who, blah, 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 backstory, but he began this saying, hey, whatever happened to that shoe? He had been to our home. He lives in Southern California. I hadn't seen him in 10 years. And on a live broadcast, he's talking about the shoe. I said, I can't find it. Everyone's looking for it. Kim, it was like on the right side, on your file cabinet, sitting. And so he told me, but we've moved things around in that decade. So it is still out there. And again, someone want to clean our garage? I got a shoe for you. So if you hear about any other shoe, that's the only shoe. I've heard variations of it. A nurse found a red shoe. A doctor found a black shoe. No. Ask, if you hear something, ask for their source material. To the best of my knowledge, I am the source. And that was in April of 1970. So that's my story. But to me, it was God's evidence that what I happened was real. Those jigsaw puzzles that I was trying to get into place, they all fell into place. And I thought, oh, I also needed a research gig. I was ambitious. I wanted to be somebody academically. And I'm glad I was given that, because now I've got all these highfalutin letters after my name, which gives me authority in some people's mind. And so I thought, well, heck, this is interesting. So I began to ask people after they were resuscitated, what do you remember during your resuscitation? And I got zip until June. And a teenager was admitted to the intensive care unit for an overdose. It was a suicide attempt. And so she'd been resuscitated. So I said, okay, what do you remember? Now it's getting boring. And she goes, oh, I was with my oompa. And I was like, what? What the heck is an oompa? Well, that was her grandpa. He died when she was too young to say grandpa. And even in a suicide attempt, this wasn't like, oh, now you're going to hell, you 16-year-old. She was met by a loving oompa, her grandpa, who scooped her up. And they sat like in a rocking chair, and he held her and then gave her what for? Like, you can't be doing that. And you are going back and you're going to help other people. But it was a loving experience. It wasn't hellfire and brimstone and an eternity and fire at all. It was, again, love. And she came back, and boy, she was a powerhouse. Because of her age and her circumstances, she wound up with me. I would take her around to area middle school and high school assemblies, actually in a 3-county area. And she would talk about to kids her age about don't hurt yourself. And this is over a boy, even worse. I mean, don't hurt yourself. Life is good, and this is temporary. You'll get over it. And she was very effective for many years, and then kind of grew out of that age-wise, and married, had children, and then I lost track of her because two people in the book I lost track of. The other, so in the book I call her Penny. Her real name's Patty. And then there's a Mr. Timmer in the book. His real name was Mr. Zimmer. Mr. Zimmer. So then now, in the meantime, I'm collecting all kinds of people. I got my own group going. I mean, I'm talking to people. And now there's been a term called near-death experiences. Raymond Moody had published a book, and we had a name for it. So Mr. Zimmer came in, and I was, now the Kleenex, the Kimberly Clark, and he was not going to live. And so I was waiting for the family at the elevator and on the intensive care unit with my Kleenex to comfort them. Elevator doors open, and they're having a party. It's like, yay, ding dong, the witch is dead. They were happy because Mr. Zimmer was a sub-bitch. I mean, he was like, pardon my language, but he was abusive. He abused his kids. He abused his wife. He was a mean drunk. He was so mean. If some child ventured across his property to retrieve a ball, he was always drinking. He would hook his finger into, this is by his own account, by the way, hook his finger into partially drunk beer cans and hurl them at the kids. Get off my lawn. He was that guy. He lived against all odds, had a near-death experience, a beautiful, loving one where he thought, and a life review, oh, there's an interesting part of a near-death experience. So he got to perceive firsthand all the pain he caused for others. And he was a changed guy and became like Seattle's sweetheart. He would carve wooden toys for children. His kids, he was finally the dad his kids wanted. But his wife divorced him because her husband was that mean, abusive drunk. And she could not adapt to this sweet guy. So changes after near-death experience can be really radical. And nothing will do it like a life review. So the two things I'd like to hit just in general about the near-death experience, there's plenty to say, is that God loves us, all of us, even the worst of us. And we are commanded to love others. And let me tell you, the harder they are to love, the more important to love. That stresses me. There are a lot of people I really can't say I love. But God loves them, so what are you going to do? That when we die, even with suicide, we're met with love. There are lessons to be learned. It's still a major no-no, but it's not like you're going to burn in hell forever, like I said. I've never heard that from a suicide attempt. I've talked to plenty. This has become like a subspecialty of mine. We are met by, often, in my research, 75% of the people I've interviewed have been met by a deceased loved one. And they all look great, like in their late 20s, early 30s, like at the peak of their physicality. And they're wonderful reunions. Children, another subspecialty of mine, usually don't have any humans that have died, and they're often greeted by pets who have died. I got a million stories about kids, including a really good Montana one for our host. But I digress. You'll have to have me back. I have so much to share. Anyway, and then there's the life review, where we are held accountable for everything, good, bad, and indifferent. Again, if school is what life is, then that's when we have our test. And it's not pass fail, but it is stressful. So, and it seems to come in two parts. First, we observe everything and we figure out, we got to connect the dots. Well, that's why I broke my leg, because I met that nurse and I married her sister. We can just see that how everything is kind of my philosophy about God's plan for our lives. And this is just Kim talk, but it's kind of like life is a game board, like Monopoly or Clue or whatever metaphor you want. So life is the game board, but we've got this dice, and we have these pieces we move around, and we have choices we can make as we move around. So we are held accountable, not for the game board, but for what we do on the game board. And the payoff is in life review. Not only will we connect the dots, but then we are put in the actual perspective of people whose lives we've touched, consciously or unconsciously. Whew. So, one woman I talked to had no memory of driving in, going up to I-5 in a dark and stormy night. She had a life review. Turned out she was held fully accountable, even though she had no knowledge of someone behind her, a woman who was terrified because she was lost. She saw the taillights of this near-death experiencer and followed them up, and then was on I-5 northbound, which is where she wanted to be. And she was filled with such relief and such gratitude for the woman who's having the near-death experience. And the woman got to feel it all. At the same time, there's a guy named Tom Sawyer, who's now deceased, but real name, another abuser who had a life review, and he abused his kids and his wife. They did hang in with him after he survived, but we call it road rage now, but at one point, and he was an Olympian, so he was like a very athletic person when this happened. He didn't like the driving habits of the guy ahead of him, so when they got to a red light, Tom got out of his car, marched over, and grabbed this driver by the clothes, and then roundhoused him with a closed fist, and then marched back. He assaulted him, and then pulled out around him. Tom was that kind of a guy. He had that life review. So he's in kind of this humming car, and in the side mirror, he sees himself coming up. He goes, uh-oh, I remember this. And he felt himself being grabbed. But again, the perspective and the fear, utter fear, and then the physical pain and the confusion of being assaulted. He felt it all, and on and on and on. Tom changed so much. In time, he actually became one of the bodyguards for the Dalai Lama. Now, there's no way the Dalai Lama is going to let anyone like Tom pre-near-death experience near him. Tom was so filled with love, so filled with service, and learned so much. He's another lecture I have on its own. So there you go. And there's other things. You hear about a tunnel, and of course the light, which I think I've covered. And there's angels. There really are scary things out there. Ignore them. If something spiritual scares you, we do have the authority to tell them to knock it off and leave us alone. Honestly, it's like flies at a picnic. If you're doing something nice, negative energy is going to come in and try to disturb you. Fear not. We have authority over that dominion. But angels are amazing, and they seem to have different jobs. And can I tell you my favorite angel story? I'm not
Absolutely. Please go for it.
I have a million angel stories. I have so many because they hang around hospitals generally, So, and I'm talking about my eyeballs. Nothing. Ooh, I'm talking about. And how I perceive angels. I happen to have water here that I haven't enjoyed during this whole program, but it's a good prop, and this is spontaneous. But this is how I see angels. You can see the glass. Well, I can see the angel, but I can see through it because they're distorted, but I can see through it. This is how I see an angel. And sometimes they're in groups, and sometimes they have missions. Sometimes they scare me more than anything scary. It's like if I would ever be tempted, which I wouldn't be, to step out of the circle of God's love, I would remember some of the continents of what we call warring angels, but I mean like. And then there's kind of like male vibes in angels, and sometimes female vibes, and sometimes just without any kind of gender assignment, if you will. But my favorite angel story, this was like had a male vibe angel, and I left Harborview and was southbound on Interstate 5 in rush hour, and all I could see ahead of me were red lights, brake lights, and I thought, better settle in, Kim. You're not going to be home in a long time. So I was on an outside lane. And to my left, I could hear this swearing, like, wah, wah. I mean, think of every bad word you ever learned. And then a few I hadn't heard before. And I mean, this guy, he was deserving a life review himself. And honking and had his head out the window, swearing at everybody around him. So I turned to him to give him like the stink eye. And there was this 2-seater small sports car, and there was the guy honking and swearing. But next to him was this huge angel. By the way, every angel I've ever seen has been ginormous, not human size, sort of humanoid, but huge. Not necessarily wings, but something going on back there in a way I can't describe. Robes, I guess. I don't know. They're not naked. But anyway, I also have never seen an angel that didn't just drop to my knees over. I'm talking about an angel. I mean, seriously. I become paralyzed. I can't function. Angels really exist. I mean, they protect us. They guide us. They sometimes trip us so we learn how to get up. They're all around us. Guardian angels. I mean, on and on. And it's a good thing I don't see them all the time, or I wouldn't even be talking. I'd be like, but anyway, and that's how I was. I see this angel's like all bent down as if he was going to be compressed by this sports car. If this angel had straightened its back, its head would have been above the roof of the car, and that really would have freaked me out. But he was kind of hunched down. So if I may, he was to my left. So here's me driving, and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I was stalled in traffic, because I was like, so I'm going this way, and no angel ever paid attention to me. I'm invisible. So it's the angel's looking straight ahead, and I'm still going, and it's still going straight ahead. And this went on for a bit, and this angel, swear to God, slowly turned his head, looked at me and went, like, what can I do? This is my guy. He's a handful. I was embarrassed as you. I hate this assignment. I'm trying to whisper in his ear. He won't shut up. I mean, all this, looking me right in the eye, and talk about I was like, whoa. And we could communicate. I understood this angel. And then the angel just slowly turned its head back and didn't regard me again. And that lane moved before mine. And I'm still, because I can't believe it. So it's the one and only time an angel paid the slightest bit of attention to me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing that. That's an incredible story. And I want to thank you for sharing your experience and everything else you shared with us. You have so much information and so many stories because you are a chapter leader at IANS. Is that correct?
Oh, we moved beyond. Thank you. Yeah, that's another thing I did. IANS is the International Association for Near-Death Studies. IANDS.org will get you there. And it's like the universe on the subject, by the way. So just go there right now. Turn me off. But through IANS, I founded the world's first support group for near-death experiencers, an outgrowth of those patients I was seeing at Harborview. And so that was in June of 1982. And we're still going, except we are in a pandemic. So now we have virtual meetings through IANS.org, second Saturday of every month. You see me, I introduce someone fabulous. And when we're on the ground, we meet on the second Saturday of every month at a Good Shepherd Center, great name for building for a near-death experience group, the Good Shepherd. Again, God just is so wonderful. So we've become our own nonprofit organization. So we're affiliated with IANS, but we're also our own thing. And I'm president, and we have a board, and we're as poor as any nonprofit ever was. And if you're ever in Seattle, or you can get a hold of me through the website, seattleians.org. Or whatever you want to do. I'm here. And again, I'm here to serve. So thank you for bringing that up because, then there is what I do.
Of course. I
would like to say, God bless us one and all. One of my favorite lines from one of my favorite books, which is A Christmas Carol by Dickens. God loves you. God loves me. If we do stupid, horrible things, we are forgiven. It doesn't hurt to ask for forgiveness. That's a bit of growth, and we step out of ego. But my best advice of all is twofold. I said this sort of at the beginning of the broadcast. Be nice to everybody. For one, there's a life review coming. Just be nice. Be patient. Be kind. Be generous. And here's the other pearl of wisdom. Be grateful. Because I find gratitude to be the fast track to God. You want to know God better? Say thank you for everything. Thank you for this breath. Thank you for this rain. Thank you for this skin. Thank you for the weight I put on. Thanks a lot. Nonetheless, gratitude is the biggie. Love and gratitude.
Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and comment with your thoughts and opinions, and check the description box for the links to my free community where I share lots of resources, my Pay What You Can community where we do classes and challenges together, my TikTok, Instagram, my Clips channel, and lovecoveredlife.com where I share my paintings. Thank you so much for your support.